Brief history.
Disclaimer, video game related.
Brief history.
Disclaimer, video game related brief history. Main releases of the Kirby franchise. You know the drill by now. On with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of A Brief History. Today's episode, Kirby. Ready, set, August 1st, 1992.
I've literally
North American
never
Nintendo
played a
fans were
Kirby
greeted
game.
with a brand new game for that classic handheld puke green gaming brick, the Nintendo Game Boy. This game was called Kirby's Dreamland. Directed by Masahiro Sakurai, developed by HAL Laboratory, and published by Nintendo, Kirby's Dreamland was a very simple yet incredibly charming and accessible action platforming game featuring an equally simple and charming protagonist known as Kirby. Named after attorney John Kirby, who defended Nintendo during a 1984 lawsuit between them and Universal Studios over the similarities between Donkey Kong and King Kong, Kirby was a small, cute pink pudge ball with limbs and a face. However, at the time of the game's release, Nintendo of America were not sure what color Kirby was due to the colorless black and white graphics of the original Game Boy. So even though Nintendo ultimately decided on the color pink, the box art of the original Kirby's Dreamland depicts Kirby as being completely white as he appears in the game. Color confusion aside, the story of Kirby's Dreamland followed a very Sonic the Hedgehog approach. Where Sonic was saving small animals from Dr. Robotnik, Kirby was saving Dreamland's food supply from the evil King Dedede. Again, it's the early 90s, story really isn't that important yet, but what did matter was the gameplay. Kirby was more or less a standard platformer. After all, that was the most popular gaming genre at the time, but what set Kirby apart from the likes of Mario and Sonic was his ability to swallow his enemies whole. While the concept of swallowing enemies whole had been experimented with in games like Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island, it had not been as largely implemented into a game's combat system as it was in Kirby's Dreamland, where it was the sole form of combat. And in the end, the game's mechanics, characters, and charm all combined to make Kirby's Dreamland one of the best-selling Game Boy games of all time, having sold over 5 million copies to this day. Thanks to the popularity of his Game Boy debut, Kirby was able to bring his unique brand of platform gaming to a home console in 1993's Kirby Adventure for the Nintendo Entertainment System. That's right, 1993, 2 years after the release of the far more powerful Super Nintendo and
when my
4
brother
years
was
after
born.
the release of the Sega Genesis. However, this choice did not at all detract anything from the quality or success of Kirby's Adventure. Being released so late in the NES lifespan, Adventure boasted immaculately colorful and detailed graphics, smooth gameplay, and enhanced mechanics. Most notably, Adventure introduced Kirby's now signature ability to copy his enemies' abilities after swallowing them. This addition helped diversify the standard Kirby gameplay and led to Kirby's Adventure being an even bigger hit than Dreamland. So much so that the game even saw a 2002 Game Boy Advance remake called
I had the Game Boy Advance.
Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland. So with Kirby's signature gameplay mechanics now intact, HAL Laboratory returned to the drawing board for Kirby's third main series installment. This game, woohoo! That was a voice crack. This game, somewhat confusingly titled Kirby's Dreamland 2, was released on May 1st, 1995 for the Nintendo Game Boy. In addition to bringing back the copy ability, Dreamland 2 also introduced a new mechanic which involved giving Kirby 3 animal partners to aid him through his journey. These animals included a rideable hamster, an owl that carried you around in its
large talons,
and a fish who helped Kirby swim through underwater stages. Dreamland 2 was yet another hit for the Kirby series, and only 1 year later, Kirby returned for his second home console romp in the 1996 SNES classic Kirby Superstar. Rather than being one large Kirby game, Superstar was a collection of multiple smaller yet equally high-quality Kirby games. These games were Spring Breeze, Dynablade, Gourmet Race, The Great Cave Offensive, Revenge of Meta Knight, Milky Way Wishes, and The Arena, as well as 2 sub-games known as Samurai Kirby and Megaton Punch. This game also introduced the concept of helpers to the series, which were secondary characters who would help the player get through each level. Kirby Superstar was a massive success and is now regarded as the quintessential Kirby game, even seeing a Nintendo DS remake in 2008. After the incredible success of Superstar, HAL and Nintendo followed up in 1997 with a more traditional Kirby title known as Kirby's Dreamland 3 for the SNES. Despite being an absolutely wonderful game with quite possibly the most amazing graphics of any 16-bit game ever, Dreamland 3 just didn't bring many new features to the franchise, at least not when compared to Superstar. But Dreamland 3 fell into the exact same situation as Kirby's Adventure. Where Kirby's NES debut was released 2 years after gamers had already shifted to the SNES, Dreamland 3 was released 1 year after the release of Nintendo's new 64-bit 3D console, the N64. And interestingly enough, this was almost the same case for Kirby's next game, Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards, which came out for the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000, just 1 year before the release of the GameCube. This was Kirby's first step into 3D and the first Kirby game not directed by Masahiro Sakurai. With Kirby 64 receiving mixed to positive reviews, HAL and Nintendo began to work on a follow-up for the aforementioned GameCube. However, this game became stuck in development for just under a decade, but more on that later! And it was at this time in the year 2000 that the home console world entered a severe Kirby drought. Aside from a 2003 GameCube racing spin-off, Kirby games lived solely on handheld systems for 10 years. However, these handheld entries to the series were all extremely innovative and well-received. But finally, in 2010, the world was given the first home console Kirby game in a decade, subtitled Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii. Epic Yarn was perhaps the most experimental Kirby title in the entirety of the series, for in this game, Kirby was turned into fabric, meaning he could no longer swallow enemies, copy their abilities, or even float. Instead, Kirby used a whip-like string to attack enemies, turned into a parachute to glide, and
that's not even Kirby. There's something different now.
could even transform into different vehicles. But why the drastic change? Well, as it turns out, Epic Yarn was not originally intended to be a Kirby game. It began development as a standalone platformer known as Fluff of Yarn. But the choice was eventually made to rework the game into a Kirby title, and the original protagonist, Prince Fluff, was pushed into a supporting role. And this change ended up being a good call, for Epic Yarn was a massive success, receiving critical acclaim and selling millions of copies. And now that Kirby was back in the home console game, Nintendo and HAL released yet another new Kirby game for the Wii in 2011. A throwback to Kirby's early days known simply as Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Now, the story behind Return to Dreamland is actually fairly interesting, for this 2011 Wii game was actually originally the GameCube sequel to Kirby 64 that had been lost in development since 2001. But in the end, after over 10 years in development, Return to Dreamland was greeted with positive response from fans and critics and helped.
I love that this video is basically like, you know, a lot of Zoomers like to watch videos on YouTube with the 2X. Like a lot of Zoomers like the 2X videos. So instead, we're just going to do it 2X by design. A 12-minute video that is actually packaged into a 6-minute video.
Helped solidify Kirby's long overdue return to the spotlight. And while we have yet to see a home console follow-up to Return to Dreamland, Kirby has found his way onto the Nintendo 3DS in the brand new Kirby's Triple Deluxe released on May 2nd, 2014. Also in 2014, at the annual E3 convention, Nintendo announced another new game scheduled for release in 2015 called Kirby's Rainbow Curse, a Wii U follow-up to the 2005 Nintendo DS title Kirby's Canvas Curse. Nintendo also announced a game called Yoshi's Woolly World, a spiritual successor to Kirby's Epic Yarn, albeit one in a completely different franchise. In addition to video games, Kirby has also had its own anime series known as Kirby Right Back At Ya. This show ran for a total of 100
the fuck? Why is there a Kirby animated? Why is there a, oh my god,
100 episodes and boasted the best worst cartoon theme song I think I've ever heard.
I can't believe
Kirby
Michael
has always
Jackson
received flack
recorded
from
that.
hardcore gamers for being nothing more than a cutesy character whose games are devoid of any challenge. But the truth is, Kirby games have steadily received nothing but positive reviews since the franchise's birth in 1992. For over 20 years, Kirby games have been consistently successful and well received, yet Kirby just doesn't receive the same accolades as Mario, Zelda, or even Donkey Kong. And that's a true shame, for what Kirby may lack in complexity, he more than makes up for in pure fun. And more than anything, that is what Kirby games are and always will be, pure fun. Thanks for watching, guys. DFTBA.
Okay, I feel like that was too much. That was too fast for me. Like, I didn't actually end up retaining any of that information, but it doesn't matter because it's time to fucking play this game regardless, baby. Let's go. Blip. You'd like to connect online.